EU laws. We have offered, whether we have agreement, and it's a cross-UK piece of policy, where we have agreement, we will legislate on behalf of the devolved administrations. Where it is in the devolved area, we respect that, and we will allow the Scottish Government to do as it sees fit in that area. And if it wants to remain in line with EU regulations, it can. And there is a rule, REUL, Retained EU Working Group for the bill, and their officials have been on that since March 2022, and we're making good, steady progress.
Dr Whitford.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. But because of the Internal Market Act, goods made in the rest of the UK can't be kept out of Scotland, even if they don't meet future Scottish standards on quality, safety or environmental impact. So does he recognise that the combined effect of both pieces of legislation will drastically increase the degree of direct rule by Westminster and drives a coach and horses through devolution?
Well, it's not. That isn't true, Mr. Speaker. We are respecting we're respecting the devolved settlement. So, if you take precision breeding, for instance, gene editing, it's the case that the Scottish farming industry, the National Farmers Union of Scotland, and all other farming unions in the UK want to be part of that bill. But we have respected the Scottish Government saying they don't want to be part of it. They want to. The dogma desires them to carry on with the EU rules, and we respect that. But as regards the UK internal market, it's absolutely right that the trade can continue seamlessly across the United Kingdom, because 60% of Scotland's trade is with the rest of the United Kingdom.
Number 2, please, Mr. Speaker.
With permission, Mr. Speaker, I will answer questions 2 and 3 together. The United Kingdom is one of the most successful political and economic unions in the world. Our collective strength means we are better able to tackle big problems such as the cost of living, leading the international response against Russia's invasion of Ukraine, growing our economy and delivering free ports to Scotland.
Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, last month the then Tory party chairman was sacked as it was revealed that he had allegedly attempted to hide his multi-million-pound tax settlement with the HMRC after failing to properly declare income. Not to mention Partygate and various other scandals. So does the Secretary of State think that a Tory government in Westminster, mired in sleaze, strengthens or weakens our United Kingdom Union?
All I would say is that the Prime Minister put integrity at every level in this government when he came in, and he acted decisively in appointing an independent ethics advisor. And when he got the report, in the incident you refer to, when he received the report, he acted immediately on receiving that report.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In Scotland and across the UK, Parliament has been dragged down by Tory and SNP sleaze and impropriety. In Holyrood, committees have been ignored, processes run roughshod over, and the responsibility to be truly accountable to both Parliaments, the press and the public has been ignored by ministers of both governments. Does the Secretary of State not agree that we need a reformed and renewed constitution across the country that is fit for a democratised United Kingdom?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I didn't catch all of that, but I would refer the honourable lady to the answer I gave before. There is a ministerial code. It sets standards of behaviour for ministers. Ministers are personally responsible for that and how they conduct themselves. And ultimately, the Prime Minister is the judge. And I think he's a man of integrity, and I trust him to make the right decisions.
Chris Clarkson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Controversial, expensive and barely afloat. The SNP government in Scotland have wasted £500 million of taxpayers' money on 2 ferries that don't work. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that there should be an urgent inquiry so that Scottish voters can have faith in the way that Holyrood uses their money?
Secretary of State.
Absolutely.
Chair of the Select Committee, Pete Wishart.
Ever so much, Mr. Speaker. Can I warmly congratulate the right honourable gentleman and his government for what they're doing to strengthen the union, whether that's the £220,000 we're currently forking out to the former Prime Minister for his legal fees, whether it's the disgraceful financial arrangements around the chair of the BBC, the bullying allegations, the tax affairs, even the Prime Minister's own second fixed penalty notice. The Prime Minister said that he would fix out Tory sleaze once and for all. How does he think he's doing getting on with that?
As I've said, he appointed an ethics advisor. He has acted decisively on everything brought forward to him to case. To date, I have full confidence in the Prime Minister, in his integrity and in the decisions he will make.
On to Lisa Cameron.
Question 4, Mr Speaker.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. This government is tackling geographical inequalities across the United Kingdom through its ambitious levelling up agenda. We're investing over £2.3 billion in levelling up across all parts of Scotland. Without the leadership of this United Kingdom government, there would be no long-term investment in the Scotland-wide city region and growth deals, putting investment in the hands of local leaders. Nor would there be investment in transformational local projects such as a new ferry for the Fair Isles or restoration of Kilmarnock's historic Palace Theatre through the Levelling Up funds.
To Lisa Cameron.
Many thanks, Mr Speaker. The Newtowns All-Party Parliamentary Group that I chair have completed a report onto the specific infrastructure needs of new towns, like my constituency of East Kilbride, built after the Second World War. Many specific infrastructure and investment needs have been established. So would the Minister encourage new towns in Scotland, like my constituency of East Kilbride, to apply for funding for levelling up to address these important needs?
Minister.
Yes is the short answer. The government's levelling up agenda is benefiting communities right across the UK, including new towns. It allows communities to address their local needs to create jobs and boost economic growth. For example, the new town of Cumbernauld in North Lanarkshire successfully secured over £9 million in the recent levelling up first round. This will enable transformational developments of the town centre. But I'd be very happy to meet the Honourable Ladies group to discuss how we might be able to support new town investment moving forward.
So, Secretary of State Ian Murray.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I thought I was coming in the next question, Mr Speaker, but I'm happy to come now. It's been a momentous week in Scottish politics, of course, and I'm sure the whole House would want to wish Nicola Sturgeon all the very best on whatever she does next in politics. Can I also pass our deepest sympathies on to everyone at Hibernian Football Club who lost their owner, Ron Gordon, very suddenly yesterday? Mr Speaker, according to the Together Through Crisis initiative, a coalition of charities, almost a quarter of people across the country regularly run out of money for essentials. At the same time, BP and Shell have made more than £1 billion a week in profits, while they avoid a proper windfall tax because of the loopholes the Prime Minister created in his scheme. So can I ask the Minister, will he listen to those charities, recognise the impact this cost of living crisis is having on working people and put in a proper windfall tax to help them?
Mr Speaker, as the honourable gentleman well knows, the cost of living support provided by this government is worth over £26 billion in 2023-2024. As a compassionate government, we have taken appropriate steps to support the most vulnerable households across the UK through additional cost of living payments, including £900 to households and means-tested benefits, £300 to pensioner households and £150 to disabled people. When it comes to taxing energy companies, this government has raised the rate of tax on companies such as BP and Shell to 75%, which the government considers to be fair given the current circumstances.
Mr Speaker, the Minister says he runs a compassionate government. Tell that to the parents who are going without food in order to feed their children. Scots are being hit very hard by the cost of living crisis, which is made worse by the state of Scottish public services. The NHS is on its knees while the failing Health Secretary is focusing on other things, and Scottish local government is having its funding decimated again while the Finance Secretary is seemingly intent on offending every minority group in Scotland. So does the Minister agree with me that amid such a serious crisis in Scotland, it's frankly absurd that failed Scottish Government ministers are fighting amongst themselves for the top job when too many Scots are worrying about how they pay their bills?
Minister.
Mr Speaker, it does seem that the SNP have decided to provide the country with compelling drama now that Happy Valley has ended. But there is a very serious point here. Whilst the SNP indulge in the most savage infighting since Labour's Blair-Brown civil war, Scotland is crying out for attention on things that really matter: the economy, the health service and the education system. Mr Speaker, the people's priorities are the priorities of this United Kingdom government. We can only hope that the new First Minister will move away from the SNP's obsession with independence and focus on the things that really matter to the people of Scotland.
David Linden.
5.
Mr Speaker, with permission, I will answer questions 5 and 12 together. Like many countries around the world, the UK faces the challenge of high inflation. That is why the Prime Minister has made tackling inflation a key immediate priority. As outlined in the Chancellor's autumn statement, this Government is committed to supporting the most vulnerable households across the UK with £12 billion worth of direct support in 2023-2024. Alongside this, the energy price guarantee is saving a typical household in Scotland around £900 this winter.
David Linden.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The former Viceroy made reference earlier on to social security powers, and the current Deputy Assistant Junior Viceroy will be aware that we have the best start grant in Scotland, whereas in England it was reported at the weekend that baby formula has now been put behind the tills in co-ops. Can the Minister outline what has gone wrong with UK welfare state that we've got to a stage where baby formula has to be put away because of fears of theft?
Minister.
Mr Speaker, as the Chancellor set out in the autumn statement, we have taken the appropriate steps to help the most vulnerable households in Scotland and across the United Kingdom. I've set out already some of the payments which are being made to households to support them during this winter. The Government continues to explore new ways of tackling poverty and helping to protect the most vulnerable, and will continue to do that moving forward.
Alan. Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Scotland is a net energy exporter, but as a consequence of being in the United Kingdom, people in energy-rich Scotland face electricity costs which are 30% higher than those in the Netherlands or in Germany. Does the Secretary of State think it is right that the Scots face the highest bills in Europe while the UK Government allows energy companies to make billions in profit?
Minister.
Mr Speaker, as I've already set out during this session, the Government is putting in place tax arrangements to ensure that excessive profits by BP and Shell and others are being taxed at 75%. I do not accept his further analysis about the situation in Scotland. This Government has put in place measures to support households during this difficult winter period, and will continue to assess what other measures we can take to do so.
Motmans.
Number 6, Mr Speaker.
Secretary of State.
Mr Speaker, this Government's commitment to Scotland is best demonstrated by what we're doing on the ground. We're investing more than £2 billion to level up across Scotland, and we're working with the Scottish Government to deliver growth deals and free ports in Scotland.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Scotland is a world leader in food and drink production, especially in high-end products like Scotch whisky and seafood, something I've been proud to promote in my role as one of the Prime Minister's trade envoys. As the UK Government continues to strike new trade agreements, what benefits will the removal of trade barriers have for Scotland?
Secretary of State.
Mr Speaker, I'm grateful to my honourable friend for raising this important matter. I'm also grateful to him for his efforts in this area. And indeed, the latest statistics show that exports of Scotch whisky and salmon underline how much demand there is for these premium products now. And of course, the UK Government has an ambitious programme of free trade negotiations which will include India and the comprehensive and progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership, and will continue to build relationship with trading partners around the world.
Jeffrey Stone.
Mr Speaker, the Secretary of State has Bladnoch Distiller in his constituency. I have Glenmorangie, Clynelish and Old Pulteney. Isn't it crazy that this proposed ban on advertising is going to damage distilleries in our constituencies and, more importantly, could actually impair on employment in rural parts of Scotland, vital local jobs?
Mr Speaker, yes, absolutely right. The Honourable is absolutely right. This is just another example of how anti-business this Scottish Government is, the SNP and their coalition partners, the Greens. And the deposit return scheme that is coming now down the tracks is just another example of how anti-business they are.
Murray Linden.
7.
Secretary of State.
Mr Speaker, like many countries around the world, the United Kingdom has been buffeted by global economic headwinds, driving high inflation and slowing growth. But we've taken decisive action to protect households and businesses. The Government knows there is more to do, and that's why the Prime Minister has pledged to halve inflation this year, deliver sustainable growth and to start reducing debt.
Murray Linden.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. We know a stronger economy begins in the hearts of our communities, but local authorities across Scotland have been forced to cut back on essential services and consider up to 7,000 job losses or hikes in council tax because of the impossible situation the Scottish Government has put them in. Does the Secretary of State consider that Scottish people should not have to pay more for poor quality services?
Thursday.
Well, Mr Speaker, the honourable lady makes a very good point. The Scottish Government have received the highest block grant settlement this year since in real terms since devolution began, £41.6 billion. And that their behaviour towards local authorities completely contrasts what the UK government's doing. We're working with Scottish councils, delivering funding directly to them to help them with the projects that matter to their people the most. And Mr Speaker, I would say that is real devolution, not SNP, not the SNP centralisation.
Ms Twist.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Scottish Government's delayed and botched deposits return scheme has turned into total chaos. Businesses want to redesign it to make it work. The public don't know about it, and MSPs want it delayed again. The scheme has been a shambles from day one, with a former SNP minister describing it as the Titanic heading for an iceberg. So does the minister agree that this process needs urgent reform, and will he encourage his cabinet colleagues to make sure any UK-wide scheme learns from the pitfalls of the Scottish Government process?
Yes. Mr Speaker, I say to the honourable lady, I've had legitimate concerns raised with me by businesses across Scotland and stakeholder groups. And I've urged the Scottish Government to pause this scheme. There is no doubt in my mind that it's not just bad for businesses, this scheme, it's also bad for stakeholders. It's also bad for consumers. And in fact, anecdotally, Aldi will sell 12 bottles of Scottish water for £1.59. Under this scheme, that will become £3.99. So if that isn't inflationary, if that isn't adding to people's cost of living, I don't know what is. And furthermore, we haven't been asked for an exemption for this under the UK rules by the Scottish Government. No request for an exemption has come. And I would say to them, the exemption bar is very high indeed. Otherwise, what's the point of UKIP?
Curry McCarthy.
Mr Speaker.
Mr Speaker, the UK Government is fully committed to supporting Scotland to realise its significant renewable energy potential. Scotland has benefited greatly from the Contracts for Difference scheme, the Government's main mechanism for supporting new low-carbon electricity generation projects in Great Britain. Indeed, Scotland has received 27% of all contracted projects to date.
Thank the Minister for that response. Scotland obviously has huge potential for green investment, but all this is being put at risk of an exodus of capital, given what Joe Biden is doing with the Inflation Reduction Act in the US. What is the UK Government's response to the Inflation Reduction Act so that we can secure investment in Scotland and in the rest of the UK?
Mr Speaker, I agree with the Honourable Lady's comments about Scotland's potential in the renewable sector. I'll allow my colleagues in the Treasury to respond to the point she made about the US policy. In relation to other opportunities for Scotland, I'm very keen to work in my role in the Scotland office to develop that, and if the Honourable Lady would like to join me in doing that, I'd be very happy to engage with her further.
Question number 9, Mr Speaker.
Mr Speaker, this Government provides wide-ranging support to Scotland's fishing industry. The processing and preserving of fish was recognised as an energy and trade-intensive sector in the Government's Energy Bill Discount Scheme, and almost half of the £20 million already awarded through the UK Seafood Fund for infrastructure projects will be spent in Scotland.
Let me do it. I welcome my honourable friend's response, and I also welcome the UK Government's decision to include seafood processing in ongoing energy support beyond April. However, even before last year's increases in energy costs brought on by Russia's invasion of Ukraine, there was already support for energy-intensive industries to other food processors, such as pork, poultry and milled grain, but not for fish. So would my honourable friend agree to join me, ideally in my constituency of Banff-and-Buchan, to meet with representatives of the seafood processing sector to discuss this shortfall?
Mr Speaker, may I first start by paying tribute to my honourable friend's work in championing the seafood sector in Scotland, and I look forward to visiting his constituency next month to chair the Scottish Seafood Industry Action Group, where I will meet with industry representatives. The UK Government's Energy-Intensive Industries Compensation Scheme supports industries exposed to a significant risk of carbon leakage and is targeted at the most electricity-intensive sectors who are competing in international markets. Any industries not included in this scheme can still benefit from the Government's Energy Bill Relief Scheme and the Energy Bill Discount Scheme.
We now come to Angus Brendan McNeill.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. To progress the structure for fisheries in Scotland, surely we have to move on from devolved Scotland to independent Scotland. I'm sure the Minister can see in Ireland there's independent Ireland, the Republic, and devolved Ireland, Northern Ireland. Which of these does he think is delivering better economically and for fisheries in Ireland? Is it the devolved version or the independent version? Across Europe and across the world, everybody knows the answer. That's the Minister.
Mr Speaker, I'm very confident that for all fishing communities across the United Kingdom, it's this government who is delivering best for them. And I'm very clear that none of the fishing communities in Scotland wish to go back into the common fisheries policy which the party opposite advocates.
Right, that completes Scottish questions. Before we come to Prime Minister's questions, I would like to point out the British Sign Language interpretation is available on parliamentlive.tv. I'm also pleased to announce that as part of our efforts to make our activities as accessible as possible, live subtitles are also now available on Parliament Live TV for all proceedings in the Chamber. I would also like to welcome some special guests who are observing our proceedings today, Madam President of the German Bundestag, and the Deputy Mayor of Kiev and colleagues. You're most welcome. We now come to questions to Prime Minister Andrew Weston.
Number one, Mr Speaker.
Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, I'm delighted that we are joined today by a delegation from Kiev. This coming Friday, there will be a national moment of reflection which will give us the opportunity to pay tribute to the courage of the Ukrainian people and demonstrate our solidarity with Ukraine. Mr Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Andrew Weston.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and can I associate myself with the Prime Minister's comments with regard to the bravery of the Ukrainian people. Labour have asked his government on 3 occasions to commit to a police response to every domestic abuse call. To date, no answer has been forthcoming. Could the Prime Minister provide a response today?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr Speaker, just this week we announced new measures to tackle violence against women and girls. This is a government that introduced the landmark Domestic Abuse Act that's rolling out specialist advisors for those who suffer and putting more funding to support victims. We will continue to do everything we can to make sure that women and girls are safe everywhere in our country.
The warm welcome given to Ukrainian refugees by so many is extremely heartwarming. Does the Prime Minister understand, though, how upset my constituents are to have bookings for weddings and other special family events cancelled when the Home Office took over a much-loved hotel? And will he redouble his efforts to put an end to this practice?
Prime Minister.
Well, my honourable friends, constituents, and indeed the whole country can be proud of the welcome that they have given to people from Ukraine over the last year. And I can assure him that we are committed to reducing the number of asylum seekers living in hotels at vast cost to taxpayers and considerable disruption to communities. I'm grateful to the leadership of the Home Secretary and the Immigration Minister in finding a sustainable solution, and the Home Secretary will make a formal update in the coming weeks on progress in standing up alternative sites for accommodation.
We now come to the Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can I join the Prime Minister in his comments about Ukraine? I had the privilege last week of seeing firsthand the courage and resilience of the Ukrainian people, and we must continue to stand united in this House in support of Ukraine. Mr Speaker, can I also say that the thoughts of the whole House, I'm sure the whole country, will be with the family of Nicola Bulley at this very, very difficult time. And can I welcome the new member for West Lancashire to her first PMQs. Mr Speaker, the Labour Party is proud to be the party of the Good Friday Agreement and peace and prosperity in Northern Ireland. We welcome attempts to make the protocol work more effectively. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that it has been poorly implemented and that the basis for any deal must be removing unnecessary checks on goods?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr Speaker, let me welcome the honourable lady to her place and associate myself with the remarks of the honourable gentleman about Nicola Bulley's family. Our thoughts are, of course, with them. As he knows, we are still in active discussions with the European Union, but he should know that I am a Conservative, a Brexiter and a Unionist, and any agreement that we reach needs to tick all three boxes. It needs to ensure sovereignty for Northern Ireland, it needs to safeguard Northern Ireland's place in our union, and it needs to find practical solutions to the problems faced by people and businesses. I will be resolute in fighting for what is best for Northern Ireland and the United Kingdom.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, we all agree that the protocol can be improved, but there are trade-offs and we need to face up to them. His predecessor told businesses that there would be no forms, no checks, no barriers of any kind. That was absolute nonsense and it destroyed trust. So in the interest of restoring that trust, will he confirm that to avoid a hard border on the island of Ireland, the deal he's negotiating is going to see Northern Ireland continue to follow some EU law?
Prime Minister. Well, Mr. Speaker, I think the honourable gentleman is jumping ahead. We are still in intensive discussions with the European Union to ensure that we can find agreement that meets the test that I set, and that is sovereignty for Northern Ireland. It's Northern Ireland's place in our precious union, and it is to find practical solutions to the problems faced by people and businesses. I have spent time engaging and listening to those communities in Northern Ireland, businesses and political parties. I have a good understanding of what is required, and I will keep fighting until we get it.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister is biting his tongue, but at some point the irreconcilables on his benches are going to twig and they're going to come after him. The former Trade Minister says there can be no role for the European Court of Justice in Northern Ireland. So will the Prime Minister be honest with them and tell them that's not going to happen?
Mr. Speaker, now again, we need to keep going to actually secure an acceptable agreement. But for the honourable gentleman to be talking about a deal that he hasn't even seen, that we are still negotiating, that isn't finalised, and it's his usual position when it comes to the European Union. It's give the EU a blank cheque and agree to anything they offer. It's not a strategy, Mr. Speaker. That's surrender.
Mr. Speaker, it's not my questions he's avoiding, it's their questions he's avoiding. His predecessors wasted months pushing the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill. If implemented, it would tie us up in battles with the EU, the United States and others at precisely the time we should be building common ground to boost our economy and show unity against Putin. Now, the Prime Minister clearly wants a closer relationship with the EU, so can he confirm that if there's a deal, he will pull the protocol bill?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, look, what the honourable gentleman wants to put the EU first. I want to put Northern Ireland first. And on these questions, the honourable gentleman said he would respect the result of the referendum, and then he promised to back a second one. All the while, he was constantly voting to frustrate Brexit. And I know what the British people know, that on this question, he can't be trusted to stick up for Britain.
Mr. Speaker, the sound you hear is them cheering the Prime Minister, pulling the wool over their eyes. It's the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement, the 30th anniversary of the Downing Street Declaration. Tony Blair and John Major both recognised that politics in Northern Ireland is built on trust and not telling people what they want to hear, and the need to take seriously the concerns of both communities, nationalists and unionists. It's vital their voices are heard. So can the Prime Minister confirm that whatever deal he brings back, this House will get a vote on it?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, of course, Parliament will express its view. But what is crucial? What is crucial here? But what is crucial here is that this is not about his desire to play political games in this House with this situation. This is about what is best for the people and communities of Northern Ireland. And that, Mr. Speaker, is what I will keep fighting for.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I take it from that this House will get a vote, and I look forward to that vote in due course. Because everyone knows the basis of this deal has been agreed for weeks. But it's the same old story. The country has to wait while he plucks up the courage to take on the malcontents, the reckless, the wreckers on his own benches. But I'm here to tell him he doesn't need to worry about that, because we will put country before party and ensure that Labour votes to get it through. He should accept our offer, ignore the howls of indignation from those on his side who will never take yes for an answer. Why doesn't he just get on with it?
Mr. Speaker, what I am doing is talking and listening to the people of Northern Ireland. That is the right thing to do. It's to make sure that we can respond and resolve to the concerns of the unionist communities and businesses in Northern Ireland, and that is what I will keep doing. But, Mr. Speaker, we know, when the Honourable Gentleman talks about his plans, we have heard that tomorrow he's going to announce 5 missions. But we already know what they are. It's uncontrolled immigration, it's reckless spending, it's higher debt, and it's softer sentences. And for the fifth pledge, Mr. Speaker, we all know it's that he reserves the right to change his mind on the other 4.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last year, the coroner determined that content promoted at Molly Russell that promoted self-harm and suicide contributed to her death. But they were only able to make that decision after years of campaigning by the Russell family and the coroners to gain access to that information. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that other families should not have to suffer as the Russell family have suffered, and that relevant data relevant to the death of a child should be more readily available both to families and to the coroner's service than it currently is?
Minister.
Can I join my right honourable friend in paying tribute to the Russell family for their tireless and dignified campaigning on behalf of all families who have been bereaved in such tragic circumstances. The coroners already have statutory powers to require evidence to be given or produced for the purposes of their investigation, but the government is listening carefully to the concerns of parliamentary colleagues and to bereaved families. The Ministry of Justice and Department for Science, Innovation and Technology are leading those discussions to ensure that we have the right set of procedures in place.
We now come to the Leader of the SNP, Stephen Flynn.
Mr. Speaker, wholesale gas prices have fallen by 75% since their peak. Yet in just a matter of weeks, the British government, the Westminster government, intends to increase energy bills by a further £500. What would motivate a Prime Minister to do such a thing?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, what we are doing is providing tens of billions of pounds of support for people with their energy bills, particularly the most vulnerable. What we're also doing, opposed by the SNP, is to invest in producing more homegrown gas here in the UK and the North Sea. But I would say to the honourable gentleman, as one of his own, one of his own members of Parliament said this week, that if the SNP were a pizza company, their products would be slow, wrong and costly. I would say to him, it's time to focus on the issues that matter to the people of Scotland, and producing more energy is absolutely one of them.
Stephen Flynn.
I'm not sure that inferring that energy bills, Mr. Speaker, don't matter to the people of Scotland is a winning strategy for this Prime Minister. But let's get real. The fact that wholesale gas prices have fallen by 75% means a windfall to the Prime Minister and the Chancellor of around £15 billion. So what they're saying, as it stands, is that they intend to raid the pockets of ordinary Scots whilst lining the pockets of Westminster. Mr. Speaker, it's time to set aside. It is time to set aside any notion of an energy price increase to instead protect households and perhaps reduce bills by £500. Does he not agree?
Mr. Speaker, we're saving households across the United Kingdom, including in Scotland, £900 with their energy bills as a result of our energy bills guarantee. And in the coming years, we will spend £12 billion protecting particularly the most vulnerable families, pensioners across the United Kingdom. But the best way to reduce people's bills is to halve inflation, as we have promised to do, and it is to produce more homegrown energy here in the United Kingdom. That's something that this government supports. Maybe he could confirm whether the SNP supports that.
You're up, Mayor. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister was well aware of the dogged campaign of the Honourable Member for North West Norfolk for a rebuild of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in King's Lynn. It's a hospital constructed from failing aerated concrete, where ceilings are now supported by more than 3,000 wooden and metal props. But is the Prime Minister also aware of the strength of feeling locally in support of the rebuild, not just in North West Norfolk, but in Broadland, North Norfolk, Norwich North, Mid Norfolk, South West Norfolk, Huntingdon, North West Cambridgeshire and South Holland and the Deeplings, whose populations are all served by this hospital? Will he support our campaign?
Can I thank my honourable friend and indeed my honourable friend from North West Norfolk, because I know they are great supporters of this project, and I know over the last year or so the Queen Elizabeth Hospital has been allocated over £50 million to address the most immediate issues at the site, but I also know they have expressed their interest in being part of the new hospital programme. The department is looking through all those bids. He'll know that I can't comment on specific ones, but the selected hospitals will be announced in due course.
Sir Geoffrey Donaldson.
Can I thank the Prime Minister for his efforts in relation to the Northern Ireland Protocol. It is unacceptable that Northern Ireland has been put in this place with a protocol imposed upon us that harms our place in the United Kingdom. It must be replaced with arrangements that are acceptable and restore our place in the United Kingdom and its internal market. Does the Prime Minister accept how important the constitutional and democratic issues are in relation to getting a solution? And will he agree with me that it is unacceptable that EU laws are imposed on Northern Ireland with no democratic scrutiny or consent? And will he assure me that he will address these fundamental constitutional issues and do so not just by tweaking the protocol, but by rewriting the legally binding treaty text?
Prime Minister.
Can I thank the right honourable gentleman for his question, but also thank him for the role that he has played in recent months in articulating unionist concerns. I have heard loud and clear when he says he wants and needs these issues resolved so that he has a basis to work with others to restore power sharing, and I know that that is genuine. He raised a question of practical issues, and it is vital that these are addressed. But he also raises, Mr. Speaker, a vital question about the constitutional and legal framework in which these arrangements exist. And I can assure him that I agree. Addressing the democratic deficit is an essential part of the negotiations that remain ongoing with the European Union. And just as he has been consistent, so have I. And I can assure him that this is at the very heart of the issues that must be addressed.
Mr McVeigh.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister has made fixing illegal immigration across the Channel one of his key top priorities. He's also said that legislation will be required to stop it. I completely agree. So, can he tell us when we can expect to see this legislation coming forward, as time is of the essence? And can he explain why sorting out this issue did not feature on the Home Office Permanent Secretary's stated top 3 priorities for his department?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, thank the my honourable friend for her question. She's right. Illegal crossings put people's lives at risk. It diverts resources away from those in genuine need, and it's unfair on those who migrate here legally. And that's why one of our 5 pledges to the British people is to stop the boats. We are working at pace on the legislation. It's important that it works. And in the meantime, our deals with Albania and France are already yielding benefits. But what I can tell her is that we want a system whereby if someone arrives in our country illegally, they will not be able to stay. Instead, they will be detained and removed to a country that they come from or a safe third alternative. That is the system that the Home Secretary and I are working hard to put in place, and that is what our legislation will deliver.
How about Thank
you, Mr. Speaker. Thanks to the Prime Minister's policies, we are now inflicted with the highest tax burden and the biggest drop in disposable income since the Second World War. And to make matters worse, tens of billions of pounds of taxpayer money was wasted on a world-beating test and trace system, billions on PPE that wasn't even fit for purpose, not to mention the endless list of crony COVID contracts going to Tory chums who profiteered at the expense of other people's misery. So when will the Prime Minister help us to recover some of that lost money so that striking nurses, teachers and other public servants can be paid the decent wage that they so richly deserve?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm very pleased that the government is in intensive talks with the Royal College of Nursing to find a way forward. As I've always said, we are keen to discuss these terms and conditions, and I'm glad that those conversations are now happening. What I'd say to the honourable gentleman is he really cares about the impact of working people, then maybe him and his party should stand up to their union paymasters and back our minimum service laws.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank the Prime Minister for his support in the launch of the new regulatory reform group. Would the Prime Minister commit to working with our group in two specific areas? The first, to improve the accountability and responsiveness of our regulators to both stakeholders and to Parliament. And secondly, to improve the economic potential in key growing areas of the economy, such as financial services, artificial intelligence and advanced manufacturing.
Prime Minister.
Well, my honourable friend makes an excellent point, and he's right about the importance of getting our regulatory framework right to drive growth and prosperity. That's why my right honourable friend, the Chancellor, has set out an extensive review of retained EU law in 5 key growth areas, including life sciences, green industries and digital technology. But also, the Government Chief Scientific Advisor is leading work to consider how the UK can better regulate emerging technologies, enabling their rapid and safe introduction.
And David.
It was a pleasure to meet the delegation from Key before questions and to confirm that across this House we are united in our support for Ukraine and its brave heroes. Mr. Speaker, the Conservative manifesto promised 40 new hospitals. After 3 years, most of these hospitals haven't even got planning permission yet. And communities feel betrayed and taken for granted. As ITV showed yesterday, St Helier Hospital in South London is literally crumbling, but there's still no plan to save it. Hinchingbrook Hospital in Cambridgeshire has sewage leaking into its wards and a roof that could collapse at any moment. Does the Prime Minister agree that these are conditions no patients, doctors or nurses should have to put up with? Can he tell the House...
Order! Prime Minister, just before we do, please don't take advantage of the order paper for others, please. Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm proud that we're investing record sums into the NHS under this government, also record sums in NHS Capital, not just going on upgrading almost 100 hospitals, developing 40 large-scale developments, as the honourable gentleman knows, but also investing in more scanners, more ambulances across the board so we can deliver vital care to people. And I'm very pleased that the most recent statistics on urgent emergency care show considerable improvement from the challenges we faced over December, and we now are on a clear path to getting people the treatment they need in the time that they need it.
Theo Clark.
I welcome the government's commitment to tackling illegal migration and particularly the issue of small boats. But can I ask my right honourable friends if he will reconsider the government's proposal to relocate approximately 500 single-male asylum seekers to Beaconside in Stafford? And can I ask him to meet with me urgently to discuss this, given the huge amount of objections I've received from constituents on this issue?
Prime Minister.
Well, firstly, Mr. Speaker, can I welcome my honourable friend back to her place? And I know that this is an issue that is concerning her and her constituents, and it's why we must absolutely stop the boats and stem the tide of illegal migrants to relieve this pressure on our local communities. But I will ensure that she meets with the Home Secretary as soon as possible to discuss her concerns, and hopefully we can arrange that meeting in the coming days.
John McNally.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
This month, the Scottish Child Payment marks its 2-year anniversary. In a cost of living crisis, this policy has been a lifeline to hundreds of thousands of people in Scotland. Therefore, will the Prime Minister follow the leadership of the Scottish Government and introduce an equivalent child payment?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the best way to ensure that children grow up not in poverty is to make sure they grow up in a workless household. And that's why I'm proud that under the record of the Conservative government, there are almost 1 million fewer children growing up in workless households, hundreds of thousands fewer children in poverty. And that's because this government is on the side of parents and will make sure that they have the jobs they need, because ultimately that is the best poverty strategy, is to have everybody in work.
David Mundell.
Mr. Speaker, I previously called out in this House the appalling level of service that my constituents and yours received from train operator TransPennine. Last month, TransPennine had the largest number of cancellations of any service provider in the UK, but it turns out that even this figure was fiddled, because TransPennine had cancelled over 1,000 trains before 10:30 the night before, so that they don't show up in the statistics. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that this practice is totally unacceptable, as is their level of service?
Well, I agree with my right honourable friend. The current service levels are unacceptable. The Rail North Partnership, which is managing the contract, is working with the company on an improvement plan. My honourable friend, the Rail Minister, is having weekly meetings with Rail North Partnership to monitor its progress. And whilst the TransPennine contract expires in May, and we are working on a new contract, if ministers conclude that the operator cannot be turned around, then other decisions may have to be made.
Richard Ford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Of the 40 promised new hospitals referred to by my right honourable friend, 11 of those are in the southwest of England. 3 of them surround my constituency in Barnstaple, Dorchester and Taunton, but none of them has planning permission. It's been reported that staff at Eastbourne District General Hospital were told that their town would not get a new hospital and that it was, quote, a barefaced lie. Given that the Prime Minister claims his mandate rests on a manifesto that promised 40 new hospitals, when will we see them?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the government is committed to building 40 new hospitals as part of the new hospital programme. In the southwest, 8 out of the 11 schemes do have full outline planning permission approved, and the remaining 3 schemes, due to when they are due to be delivered, would not be expected to have planning permission at this stage, and we're working with the Trust to go through that process. So everything is on track, and we will bring those hospitals to the people in the southwest.
Stevenson.
£3 million sent to Wolverhampton to trial the new Better Health app, which will support Wolfrunians make better choices about their diet and fitness. Will he welcome this and also celebrate our grassroots sports clubs in Wolverhampton, especially Wentzfield Aces Cycle Speedway Club, who celebrated their Diamond Jubilee last year?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, can I join my honourable friend in commending all her local sporting organisations for the job they do? And she's absolutely right that prevention is absolutely better than a cure, and ensuring that we can support people to live healthy, fulfilling lives is absolutely part of our plan. And that's why we're investing in football pitches, tennis courts and youth facilities right up and down the country. And I'm glad that her constituents are benefiting.
Ellen Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government hasn't only broken its promises on new hospitals, it's also broken its pledge of 6,000 more doctors, with the number of qualified GPs having actually fallen. GPs in Shropshire are seeing 400 more patients each than they were in 2016, which is one of the biggest rises in the country. Places across the country, East Sussex, Devon, Cambridgeshire and Hampshire, have also seen the number of qualified GPs fall. When will the Prime Minister end his government's neglect of local health services and recruit and retain the GPs we need?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the facts are this. There are 2,200 more GPs in general practice today. There are 15,000 more doctors in the NHS, and there are 30,000 more nurses. And that's because we're putting record funding in and backing the NHS and getting patients the care that they need.
Robert Nuttall.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I
commend my right honourable friend in grasping the nettle and seeking to negotiate an agreement on the Northern Ireland Protocol. Does he share my frustration with the expressed views of people who are commenting upon a deal that has yet to be reached? And does he agree with me that the best way to reduce or even end the jurisdiction of the CJEU is through treaty change itself and not through domestic legislation in this Parliament?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr Speaker, my right honourable friend is absolutely right. We need to keep going, but he's also right that we need to find enduring solutions to the challenges faced by the people of Northern Ireland, and that's why, as my right honourable friend mentioned earlier, it is absolutely right that we address the constitutional and legal framework of our arrangements and ensure that we can put in place new arrangements that secure Northern Ireland's place in the United Kingdom.
Matt Weston.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Prime Minister is no stranger to paying fines, but last week the £2.3 billion he paid to the EU after the UK government allowed Chinese fraudsters to flood Europe with cheap goods is the worst waste of public money. My question is simple. If he can find £2.3 billion to pay a fine, why can't he pay NHS workers and others the pay increases they deserve?
Mr Speaker, he may not have seen that the Royal College of Nursing are now in talks with the government about resolving the disputes, and I'm grateful to them. I'm grateful to them for entering to those talks with a spirit of a constructive attitude, but also to calling off their strikes next week. What I would urge him and his colleagues to do is be on the side of working people, and that's to back our laws to introduce minimum safety levels across the NHS and transport, because that's the best way to demonstrate that you're on the side of hard-working families, Mr Speaker.
Mr Speaker, I wholeheartedly support my Prime Minister's priority to stop the boats. So could he please bring in the small boats bill next week?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr Speaker, I thank my honourable friend for his support. I share with him the same desire, which is to stop the boats for all the reasons that we've discussed in this session, and he should rest assured that the Home Secretary and I are working intensely and as quickly as possible to bring forward that legislation, because what I want is what he wants, is to ensure that those people who come here illegally will simply not be allowed to stay.
Charlotte Littles.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. During recess, my community in Warrington was rocked by the murder of 16-year-old schoolgirl Brianna Jai. What support will the Prime Minister offer to our community and to our local schools in order to ensure that they have the support that they need to support Brianna's classmates and her family as we try to heal from this appalling tragedy?
Prime Minister.
Well, can I thank the honourable lady for raising this issue and express my sympathies to Rihanna's family and friends for what's happened. I know she will be playing her part in her local community in supporting them at this difficult time. I know the Home Secretary is shortly due to visit the area, and she will be able to discuss with the honourable lady what support can be provided to support the community at a time like this, and she should know that she will have what she needs from the government.
Final question, Anthony Macron.
Mr Speaker, I can't ask the Prime Minister to stop time or tide, but I might ask him to offset it, because in South Devon the Slapton line is being eroded away, and I need him to help me lobby the Department for Transport and the DEFRA Secretary to see that we can get the repairs done, because Natural England is standing in the way of this vital link and stopping us from doing the developments that we need to do. Will he support me?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr Speaker, my honourable friend is a fantastic campaigner and advocate for his constituents. I know that this particular issue is causing frustration and concern in his community. He's absolutely right to raise it. I will ensure that he gets the appropriate meetings he needs with the ministers in question so we can work with him to try and find a resolution.
That completes Prime Minister's questions.
That's right.
Point of order, Caroline Ansell.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can I ask, is it still the convention and the courtesy one might expect from a fellow parliamentarian for them to contact you in advance of a question should they be minded to raise your constituency in their question? I refer to the honourable gentleman who's no longer in his place, who talked about the Eastbourne District General Hospital and in fact repeated gossip and hearsay through social media that has already been successfully challenged by the Hospital Trust, which has powered from requires special measures and requires outstanding all the way through to outstanding and good, I should say, and is working incredibly hard to deliver what has been described as once-in-a-generation funding.
Well, can I just say, when I stand, it's important that members sit down. Don't worry. What I would say is, first of all, no, it's not a point of order. The fact is, people can mention other constituency issues as hospitals because they usually cover a much greater geographical area, so they wouldn't inform the member. What I would say is, I do hope she has informed the member that she's named, that she was about to raise this point of order. No, there's nobody here. So can I just say, if we're going to play at the rules, we all get the rules right before we start to make the point. What I would say is, she's certainly put on record her concerns and her views, but it certainly isn't the way to do it without telling the member in future. Right, let us move on to presentation of the bill. Mr Barry Sherman.